Hi, welcome everybody to our project, which is called the Outdoor Water Conservation Case Studies for the Rockland County Legislature. So as you can see, this is our agenda for today, and I'm going to be taking you through the background for what we worked on this semester, and then two of our other members in the group, Nikki and Aaron, are going to look at some of the specifics of what we worked on. So you heard a little bit already about the purpose of the workshop, but we wanted to give our own explanation. So the workshop gives students the opportunity to get real-world experience on applied projects working with a client, and it allows them to develop certain useful skills, such as communication skills, working with professionals, as well as problem solving as an individual or within the context of a group. And this will help us overcome some of the problems we will face after graduation. So this is the team that we worked with, and as you can see, we brought a wide range of knowledge, experience, and interests to this semester. And of course, all of us have the similarity of a sustainable development major or concentration. The clients that we worked with this semester was Alden Wolf, who is the chairman of the Environmental Committee for the Rockland County Legislature. We also consulted with Dan Miller, who is the Bureau Head of Water Supply for the Rockland County Department of Health, as well as Stuart Brayman, who is a researcher at Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory. So for those of you who aren't familiar, Rockland County is in southeastern New York State, and it is currently facing water scarcity due to population growth pressure and land use changes. So one important thing to know about Rockland County is that the majority of its water supply comes from a private water supplier called United Water, and this has led to some complications and difficulties in implementing policies on water use. So the Rockland County Legislature is looking into a way to solve this problem by addressing the demand problem with water use. And this is what brought them to the Sustainable Development Workshop. And so now I'm going to turn you over first to Nikki, who is going to discuss one of the possible solutions we looked at in the sensitivity analysis, which analyzed different water-saving programs that Rockland could potentially use. And then later, Aaron is going to look in depth at one of the case studies, which is another option that we developed on outdoor non-emergency water conservation ordinances. Nikki.
Thank you, Caitlin. Okay, so we worked on the sensitivity analysis, which was something of a sub-project for the workshop's main goal this year. So this is really an extension of last year's workshop. The spring 2012 group analyzed the cost effectiveness of 7 different water conservation programs that could potentially address water scarcity in Rockland County. To do this, they used an Excel-based software program, which was provided by the Alliance for Water Efficiency, and we also used this same software in our sensitivity analysis. So the significance of the sensitivity analysis is because last semester's project relied on a number of assumptions as inputs for their model. For example, they had to guess how many people would participate in each program. They were reasonably estimated guesses, but they were still guesses. So the sensitivity analysis looks at how much variation will occur in our outputs if we make changes in our assumptions. To do this, we performed research and used case studies to project a reasonable range of variations in our inputs, and we recorded the effect on our results. It's also important because it tests the stability of last semester's work, and it supports decision-making and recommendations that may stem from the work that we've done in the workshop. For our methodology, we based our analysis on 2 models. There was a conservative model and an optimistic model. These models both took into account several variables that might affect the success of our outputs, as well as the variables that we personally changed, which were the participation rate and the unit water savings for each program. We then recorded the gross water savings and the utility and customer benefit cost ratios. We did this for each individual program, and then we combined all of our programs into an ultimate optimistic and an ultimate conservative to get an idea of what the total range could be if we implemented these programs. So I'm just going to take you through an example of one of the programs that we looked at, which was the Water Waste Ordinance. So we examined a generic outdoor water conservation ordinance, which didn't have anything to do with rebates or special water-saving technology. It was simply an ordinance that would say, for example, you cannot water your lawn on X days. Last semester's report didn't really have very much research based on the water savings or participation rates, so we really focused on that. One way we did this was we used the United Water Survey to get an idea of how many people water their lawns in Rockland County on a regular basis. We also took into account a couple other important assumptions, one of which was the potential annual unit water savings, which we calculated to be 81 gallons per household per day. And we got this from a combination of information on the Lamont Doherty website, as well as further hypothesizing on our part. We also included 25% of potential for optimistic and 10 for conservative, and this takes into account how often regular lawn watering occurs, as well as how many days the ordinance would be implemented. So for our results, we found that the ordinance program was can be considered cost-effective in all of our scenarios, in both the conservative and optimistic, as well as this semester's work and last semester's work. We also saw meaningful water savings achieved in both scenarios, which amounted to about 360,000 gallons per day in the optimistic and 80,000 in the conservative. These are definitely meaningful because our standard is the projected long-term supply requirement of 7.5 million gallons per day. So there were a few programs that were consistently cost-effective both last semester and this semester. There was a residential high-efficiency toilet rebate program. There was the water waste ordinance, and the single-family high-efficiency washer rebate program that would require a slight modification for machine eligibility, but it was cost-effective with that modification, and we do recommend that. We also found that in our cumulative model, when we put all the individual programs together, that there was a total water savings in 2021 of over 3 million gallons in the optimistic model and over 1 million gallons in the conservative model. And again, this is measured against that 7.5 million gallon per day standard, so it is meaningful. So this chart just shows all the projected water savings scenarios over all of our different models. The ones that we calculated that we really want to draw attention to are the green line, which is the second from the top, and our new optimistic model, and the red line, which is all the way at the bottom, which is our conservative model. We do want to point out that the old optimistic model, the orange line on the very top, is very clearly out of the range that we calculated. That's because we found that there was far too optimistic assumptions in one of the programs last semester, which was the toilet rebate program. That, combined with the washer program, comprised 2/3 of our total water savings, so that shows up as like quite a significant effect on our graph, which is why that is outside of the range. So just some final conclusions. Last semester's limits were found to be valid based upon our sensitivity analysis, with the exception of that high-efficiency toilet rebate program, which we discussed before was too optimistic last semester. We also found that about 2/3 of our water savings came from rebates targeted at high-efficiency appliances, which would be high-efficiency washing machines and high-efficiency toilets. We also want to point out that the water waste ordinance, while it was a small effect, it was definitely meaningful, and we do want to point out that that particular program is only in effect for a portion of the year. People don't tend to water their lawns in winter, at least in New York. So our numbers are annual, but we hypothesized that if we looked at the peak usage season, this water waste ordinance would actually comprise a much more significant portion of our total effect. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Aaron, and he's going to talk about the more qualitative portion of our project, which entailed further researching water waste ordinance case studies.
Okay, I'm going to talk about one of the case studies. And the problem that we approach this with trying to solve is how to introduce non-emergency outdoor water conservation ordinances in Rockland County. Our methodology was to get a wide scope across the U.S. of water ordinances which are already in place in certain counties, towns, and cities. We looked from the East Coast all the way to the West Coast. Alex looked specifically at California and Washington State, Melissa and Caitlin in the greater New York City area, specifically in Nassau County, and Shelley and I looked at North Carolina, Massachusetts, and New Jersey. Today here's a list of the 11 locations that we looked at, but today I'll be specifically talking about Cary, which is in inland North Carolina. A little background on Cary. Cary is very similar to Rockland in terms of demographic. It's an affluent suburb. It's very close to UNC Chapel Hill and NC State Raleigh. It's a suburb of Raleigh, and the population has grown by 50,000 over the past decade, coupled with a persistent drought from 1999 till 2002, and the driest year on record. The water scarcity has been exacerbated. They only have one major source, which is a surface source, and that's Everett B. Jordan Lake, with a maximum withdrawal under law of 24 million gallons per day. Residential customers account for 71% of total consumption, and 42% of total demand is associated with residential irrigation, making it a very good place to start for water conservation. And unlike Rockland, water in Cary is managed at the town level, and they are able to pass ordinances and directly influence the water supply that way. In 1996, they had great oversight, and they implemented a conservation and demand management program with a stated goal to reduce per capita consumption by 20% by the year 2015, which is on track to be met. One of the water ordinances passed in 1998, and these are all indicative of what we found in most of the locations that we looked at. The first one was the wastewater ordinance, which outlaws the wasteful use of water on impervious surfaces such as blacktop and concrete. Say if you're washing your car and you leave your hose running for an extended period of time, you may attract the attention of an officer. And also the negligent treatment of major leaks. If your hose or irrigation system has a major leak and it's wasting water, then you also may be subject to a warning and then a fine. The rain sensor ordinance is very much what it sounds like. It's a mechanism which senses when it rains and shuts off the irrigation system. All customers, residential and non-residential, are required to install them, and they cost about $20 to $30, making it affordable for the local demographic. And the final one is an alternate day watering ordinance, which allows customers to water their lawns on an alternate basis, so odd addresses on one day, even on the next, on a rotating basis. Although there are a few exceptions, if you have a drip irrigation or any high efficiency technology to deliver water straight to the root, then you're allowed to water any day of the week. And this also goes for private wells and ponds on properties. As far as implementation, Cary allots $185,000 for 5 what they call public education officers to patrol and look for violations. And they typically patrol during Monday through Friday, normal business hours. But during drought periods, they will patrol 24/7. And as you can see from this graph, during drought periods, when they implemented 24/7 patrolling, there is a huge spike in ordinances. So this would tell us that maybe the amount of ordinances reported sort of goes along with how much they are actually patrolling. But aside from sort of punitive measures, Cary has a huge emphasis on education, and in symphony with these ordinances, they have also adopted education programs at the elementary level. They have town employees go in and speak to 2nd and 3rd graders and give them tours of water treatment facilities, and they have community outreach programs that teach residents about conservation methods as well. Results in Cary, they have been successful, and they are on track to reduce per capita consumption by 20% by the year 2015, although their population continues to increase at an annual rate of 5%. So this means overall consumption continues to rise. and currently they're at 50% of total supply as far as demand right now, and the EPA estimates by 2030 78%, an increase to 78% in demand. To sort of fix this problem, one of the methods they're using is to start to use reclaimed water, which removes the solid waste from water and which then can be used for irrigation or manufacturing processes, just not for drinking. So overall lessons that we've sort of observed for Rockland County, there are many. We put them into broad categories of relationships, enforcement, incentives, and education programs, and water efficient landscaping. As far as enforcement and education, compliance is key in these. If the community is not involved, if they're not conservation minded, then the ordinances will not be successful. Although the Rockland County legislature has limited ability to really implement education programs, we suggest that they look into all avenues possible to get the community on board. Leveraging relationships between the layers of government is especially important in Rockland because water scarcity is a very localized phenomenon, because otherwise the surrounding municipalities, they have plentiful water. It just so happens that Rockland County was not allotted any water from New York City supply when it was established in the early 1900s. Also, learning from the past and writing flexible ordinances that allow exemptions such as drip irrigation, or if the customer waters their lawn by hand, then it's also important to include that in the ordinance. And lastly, water efficient landscaping using high efficiency varieties of grass and methods to apply the water. It's more of a holistic approach, and we also think that on top of the ordinances that it should be explored. In conclusion, we sort of have introduced a wide variety of options for Rockland County to look into, but even with the complexities of introducing water ordinances, there is a clear benefit as far as conservation goes in water demand reduction if they are to implement them. If you have any questions, feel free to ask any of us.
How did you select the different locations across the United States to compare and contrast for your case studies?
Well, Stuart Brayman, who Stuart Gavin recognized at the beginning, he's kind of been our special advisor. He started out by giving us a few recommendations and contacts to search for and kind of follow up with that he's met in his conservation sort of experiences. And then specifically for the West Coast, it involved a lot of kind of hit and miss. I would talk to someone and then they would refer me to someone else. So it was a lot of internal referrals. It seems that the conservation community is pretty tight-knit across the U.S., so we worked via that method.
Yeah, and just overall geographically, we try to find ordinances around Rockland County that are close to where we're looking at, so it's more relevant.
What was the big surprise for this coming out of this for you? I mean, you guys were building on data from a previous semester, so I'm just wondering if there was something that happened that you were shocked to see, or was it really just what you expected?
Basically what we noticed, because there was 7 different water conservation water savings programs from last semester, and then it was narrowed down to 5 that were found to be cost effective last semester, and then this semester we found that the major one that was the most cost effective ended up saved a lot of water and also had a very high benefit cost ratio was the high efficiency toilets for the residential homes. So in addition to saving a lot of water, also it's a very cost effective program.
And on the case study side, well, the reason why we looked into this to begin with was because last semester was focused on analyzing these different programs. They took up to analyze the range, the sensitivity analysis, and then the case study, one of the programs that was the least well researched was the one that the case study sort of took up. I don't know if you guys want to speak to any surprises that you found in your case studies.
Well, I think one of the major surprises was how they enforce these ordinances, not necessarily through just punitive measures. Because I was also looking at Chapel Hill, which has reduced per capita consumption by 30%. They do not even have officers who patrol it strictly through education.
Often I found as well, and I think Caitlin would say the same, in New York, even when there was an ordinance in place, didn't mean that anyone knew about it. We would talk to people even within the water department, and some people said, "What ordinance?" Often because it was from the 80s and it hasn't been revised since. So I was specifically surprised about that part of it.
Yeah, a lot of them seem to be the most aware about the ordinances they had during water emergencies, so for drought conditions. And that seems to be the greatest focus in the most immediate area around Rockland. So either they didn't have any non-emergency ordinances, or it just wasn't really a focus, or it had even been sort of just like forgotten about in the meantime.
And just going along with what Erin said, before I dive into researching my ordinances, I felt that probably the more you spend on like enforcement, maybe the better results you would get. But what I found out through my research is that a lot of time when you actually don't even have a budget for enforcement, you actually see a lot of people, actually for example neighbors catching each other and looking for violators when you have uneven audit restrictions. So there's actually a lot of ways, very cost-effective ways to enforce the ordinances.
Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you.
I like that question because we want things that they haven't necessarily prepared for, like what surprised you about the project. So we're actually, this was really, thanks everyone for being on time and keeping to the time limits. So we're going to break now. I just want to remember to thank key people. I want to thank the students, first of all, for all their hard work. Actually, the high point of this is always fun, but the high point of the semester, in my experience, is when we go to the offices of the clients and actually deliver this a little more technical, actually significantly more technical presentation again to the experts. And I have always really been amazed at how skilled you guys have gotten. A lot of it comes out with more difficult questions, technical questions, which really are fun. I think you'll enjoy that and find it very satisfying as well. But I also want to thank Eileen for doing continued excellent TA assistance this semester. Dr. Brayman, again, he's been painstaking in attending so many classes as a liaison to sort of, again, as I say, an unusual relationship with our workshop, which has worked out very well, because I could never bring in this kind of technical knowledge because it's not my area of work. And then last but not least, I want to thank Natalie and Jessica for the admin assistance they give us. They never say no to anything we ask. And they've provided so much help from Metro cards to if we need to get some lunches or food. We don't have food here this time, right? Oh, we do. Excuse me. So anyway, this couldn't be done without the continued assistance from Natalie and Jessica and the whole administration. So